Imagine for a moment that you open your eyes and nothing around you makes sense. Not the bed, not the air, not even the way your body feels under the covers. You're not in your world anymore. And before you panic, yes, this is exactly as strange as it sounds, because this isn't just another century. It's the Gilded Age, the late 1800s, when being rich meant living in a way so absurd it almost feels like satire. And here you are, suddenly one of those untouchable titans of wealth, a character history books call robber barons, but whose mornings begin in palaces that would make modern luxury hotels look like budget motels. And while you might think this sounds exciting, let me assure you, the cost of being here, oh, you'll feel it soon enough. His eyes snapped open in darkness, confusion wrapping around him like a heavy fog, and for a fleeting moment he reached for the comfort of his old life. His bed, his cotton sheets, the hum of a heater, but nothing familiar arrived, only the suffocating silence of a cavernous room. The mattress beneath him felt too perfect, too plush, the sheets impossibly smooth, almost liquid against his skin, not cotton, but silk spun and embroidered by the kind of seamstress whose eyesight was probably sacrificed to create something this opulent. He blinked hard, adjusting to the gloom, and slowly the room revealed itself. Towering ceilings, disappearing into shadow, a mahogany four-poster bed draped in silk canopies, hand-stitched curtains, fur throws heavy enough to crush a lesser man, the kind of bed that could bankrupt entire families. And yet here it was, simply the place where he slept. Yes, slept, as though this staggering excess were routine. And before you, the listener, roll your eyes and think you'd enjoy it, let me whisper this truth. It's intoxicating, yes, but also suffocating, like being trapped in a museum exhibit of wealth, where you are both prisoner and prize. He noticed the air next, stale and faintly smoky from coal drifting in through windows that sealed nothing, because insulation wasn't a concern for people who had endless servants to stoke fires through the night. As if summoned by his very thought, a knock at the massive door jolted him. His heart raced. His voice sounded alien to his own ears as he croaked, "Enter." The door opened, and in marched a man in his 50s, spine straight as a rifle, dressed in black and white livery, followed by 4 younger men, each carrying silver trays. "Good morning, sir. It is 7:15, the older man said with a tone of respect, but not servility. This was Richardson, his valet, the man who knew his habits better than his own wife ever would, a walking calendar and mirror combined. Behind Richardson, the others moved with precise efficiency, opening curtains, setting down trays, preparing a day in which every second of his existence was orchestrated by someone else. The curtains drew back mechanically, and the gray morning of New York spilled in, revealing Fifth Avenue, alive with carriages and deliveries. Across the way, Central Park stretched wide, though the trees were bare, the city already heaving with energy. He muttered under his breath, "Jesus," before correcting himself. "I mean, yes, thank you." The slip didn't even ruffle Richardson. Eccentricities were expected of men like Vander Hughes, the name that seemed to belong to this body. A porcelain cup of coffee was presented, hand-painted, delicate, and probably worth more than most workers earned in months. And when he sipped it, he nearly laughed. Even his taste buds had been replaced, accustomed now to cream and sugar, luxurious excess seeping into the smallest details of daily life. When he asked about the day, Richardson recited it with military precision. Breakfast with Mr. Morgan and Mr. Carnegie aboard his private dining car, Mrs.'s reception later, dinner at Delmonico's with the governor and railroad commissioners. Yes, that's right, a private dining car, an entire train car designed solely for him to eat breakfast in. You, sitting there, might think you've seen Rich on Instagram, but let me tell you, You have not seen Rich until breakfast comes with its own locomotive. The servants guided him toward the bathroom, and when the double doors opened, he almost laughed at the ridiculousness. A room bigger than his entire modern apartment, a clawfoot tub filled with steaming water and rose petals, gold fixtures gleaming, a marble sink carved from a single piece of stone. Two servants approached to undress him, and here's where you too might feel it, this eerie absence of privacy, because in this century, his body wasn't just his, it was property to be managed by staff. He stammered, insisting he could handle the bath himself, and Richardson's eyebrow twitched, the closest thing a man like that ever came to a gasp. Still, the valet withdrew, leaving him alone in the perfumed water, oils imported from France, soaps from Italy and England, arrayed like treasures, the heat of the tub reminding him that somewhere downstairs, servants had carried coal and wood and stoked fires so that he might bathe in comfort. And yet, even here, a detail clawed at him, coal dust under his fingernails, black smudges on manicured hands, a sign of what his empire was built on. Mining, railroads, steel, maybe all of them. He scrubbed it away, but the image lingered. Soon they returned, drying him with warmed towels, dressing him piece by piece, union suit, wool socks and garters, detachable collars, silk tie, waistcoat with pearl buttons, jacket, polished shoes, cufflinks that glittered with diamonds, until the figure in the mirror barely resembled him at all. A gold pocket watch was presented, a Patek Philippe engraved with his monogram, worth more than a modern car, and when Richardson asked if he preferred the navy pinstripe or gray wool suit for breakfast with the titans of industry, he chose navy, safer, more sober. At last, dressed and perfected, he descended the staircase, the house unfurling around him like a museum of power, oil paintings in gilded frames, carpets thick enough to swallow sound, maids curtsying, footmen at attention. In the morning room, a feast for one awaited steak, eggs, sausages, muffins, fruit, tea, coffee, more food than a family could eat in a week, and yet here it was set before him, as though he were an emperor. The New York Times was presented on silver, headlines blaring strikes and violence, workers clashing with Pinkertons, his own name whispered between lines of rail consolidation. That's the moment it struck him like a physical weight. He wasn't just wealthy, he was one of them, a robber baron, the kind of man history books would describe with awe and disgust, the kind whose signature could starve or save families, the kind who lived in gold-plated comfort while children worked 12-hour shifts in factories. He lifted the porcelain cup again, coffee sweet and rich, and for the first time the taste felt bitter, the kind of bitterness that comes from realizing the gilded chains you wear gleam beautifully, but cut all the same. Welcome to the Gilded Age, the narrator's voice whispered across centuries. Welcome to the golden cage where you have everything, except perhaps yourself. He left the breakfast table, appetite dulled by headlines screaming of strikes and blood, and descended to where his carriage waited, a gleaming black landau with monogrammed doors, 4 matched horses stamping against the cobblestones, footmen in forest green livery snapping to attention as though he were royalty. And yes, if you're still trying to imagine what it feels like, let me break the illusion. This isn't glamorous in the modern sense, it's terrifying, because every bow, every gloved hand holding open a door is also a reminder that hundreds of lives hang on your whims, your wages, your decisions, and when you fire a man, his family may starve, and when you cut corners, men die in mines and factories. He settled inside the carriage, leather softer than any chair he had ever sat in, beveled glass windows, decanters of whiskey available for what was apparently considered a normal morning sip. The horses clattered down Fifth Avenue, past ladies in gowns, immigrant children hawking papers and rags, smoke-belching factories where men labored 12-hour shifts, and as if fate wished to prove the point, a beggar missing an arm approached, whispering for alms, only to be shoved away by the footman until Vander Hughes, betraying his own character, pressed a gold coin into the man's hand. A week's wages for one of his workers, a flicker of kindness, but to the staff, an anomaly. They turned onto 42nd Street, past Grand Central Depot, bypassing the public entrance to a private gate where guards saluted, because wealth in this age meant you never brushed shoulders with common folk. The carriage pulled alongside a marvel, his private dining car, painted burgundy with gold leaf trim, monogram blazoned like a coat of arms, and stepping inside was like stepping into Versailles on rails. Persian carpets swallowing sound, mahogany panels polished to mirrors, chandeliers glittering above velvet chairs, and yes, an actual fireplace flickering on a moving train, because why not, when extravagance is your brand? Waiting with a glass of whiskey at 8 in the morning was J.P. Morgan himself, nose bulbous and purpled, eyes sharp as razors, a man who once held the nation hostage in his library until bankers bent to his will. He greeted Vander Hughes with impatience, chastising lateness, though it was still early, and gestured to the decanters as though whiskey were water. Moments later, Andrew Carnegie arrived, shorter than expected, jovial in manner, voice tinged with Scotland, bragging about paying his men $3 for 12 hours, mocking the strikes, even as the reality of his Homestead massacre lingered in history. They laughed, and you, yes, you listening, might think it's thrilling to dine with titans, but remember, this laughter is barbed wire. It's the sound of men who measure human lives as columns on balance sheets. They sat to breakfast. Caviar, salmon, eggs, coffee poured into bone china, and as the train glided north, smoother than silk, the conversation slid darker, conspiratorial. Morgan proposed pooling their railroads to fix national freight rates, illegal under the Interstate Commerce Act, and when Vander Hughes dared mention legality, the men scoffed, mocking his conscience, reminding him he had bribed legislatures last year, calling it investments in governmental relations. Bribery, collusion, monopoly, all before the second course. Carnegie demanded $15 million for a deal. Morgan pressed about unions, and the three of them schemed like generals, plotting to crush rivals, to starve out Huntington and Southern Pacific through financial sieges, hostile takeovers, and media manipulation, casually weaponizing Congress and newspapers like chess pieces. And here's where I'll break it to you bluntly. This isn't business genius. It's legalized piracy. Men carving the nation like a carcass. And yes, history will polish their names into philanthropy, but don't forget the bones beneath. By the time the train reached Garrison, papers signed, alliances forged, Vander Hughes had participated in an empire-shaping conspiracy, the kind your history class calls progress, though it smelled more like blood. Back in the city, his day did not relent, because in the Gilded Age, survival meant as much social combat as business conquest. At home, in a palace of limestone and marble, he met Constance, his wife, seated in a morning room with monogrammed stationery and a guarded smile, her voice carrying the coolness of a partner rather than a lover, yet with flashes of warmth when he surprised her with courtesy. She invited him to lunch, quail salad at a table set for formality, and through careful conversation, he learned their absent daughter, Elizabeth, was in Europe, their son at boarding school, the children raised by distance and tutors, because in this world, even family was managed like an enterprise. Constance brightened at news of Mrs. Orr's invitation, that queen of society who ruled the 400, the list that decided who mattered, and yes, you may laugh at the pettiness of it, but to them it was war, each invitation a victory, each exclusion a wound. By afternoon, dressed anew, Vander Hughes and Constance entered Astor's drawing room, a battlefield of lace and diamonds, where glances were daggers and gossip was artillery. He was introduced to John Jacob Astor, handsome, smug, old money, confidence dripping from every word, casually hinting at interest in Elizabeth, a potential match that would cement alliances, transform his daughter into currency for social legitimacy. Around him, scions scoffed at laborers, sneering at strikes as laziness, dismissing safety as a waste of funds, and when Vander Hughes dared suggest addressing genuine dangers, they laughed, assuming it was a joke, because empathy was alien to them. He endured, nodding, bluffing through conversations about yachts and Newport cottages, where mansions stood empty 11 months a year, and across the room Constance dueled in smiles with Caroline Astor, earning a subtle, hard-won recognition, an invitation to host, a signal that the Vander Hughes name was climbing toward legitimacy. Constance nearly glowed with triumph on the carriage ride home, whispering that Elizabeth might be courted by John, that after years of whispered slights, the doors of society were opening. And here, let me break the wall and tell you, this is the true engine of the Gilded Age, not just steel or oil, but insecurity, the desperate hunger to be seen as worthy by people whose only superiority was timing, families rich a generation earlier than yours. And so he played along, mask upon mask, ruthless industrialist with Morgan, dutiful husband with Constance, ambitious patriarch at Astor's reception, each performance a role in a theater where the currency was reputation and the stage was New York itself. By evening he wasn't finished. Delmonico's awaited, chandeliers and mirrors, politicians and judges cloaked in cigar smoke and French sauces. The governor raised toasts, senators slurped turtle soup, lobbyists whispered about tax bills that would cripple the state but enrich the railroads, and Vander Hughes was pulled into another dance, suggesting language for exemptions, wrapping corruption in silk words. They spoke of judicial appointments, commissions staffed with loyal sons, constitutional amendments to shield wealth, and through it all, the bribery was dressed as philanthropy, the theft disguised as investment. Dessert arrived gilded with gold leaf. The conversation as sweet and poisonous as the sugar, and when Vander Hughes finally retreated home, changed again by Richardson's ritual hands, he lay in his massive bed, knowing this. He had schemed with titans, bartered his daughter, bought a government, and tomorrow the play would continue. Morning arrived again, servants bustling like clockwork, and soon his private rail car carried him not to conspiracy, but to Newport, Rhode Island, playground of the elite, where summer palaces loomed even in winter. The carriage delivered him to Breakwater Hall, his own estate, and if you think the New York mansion was outrageous, imagine a limestone chateau rising from cliffs over the Atlantic, 5 stories of turrets and columns, 97 rooms, 30 bedrooms each with private baths, a ballroom for 200, a library dressed in Tudor, a music room Venetian, drawing rooms in Louis styles, every chamber decorated not for comfort but for competition, a museum of stolen aesthetics designed to scream one thing louder than the surf outside: I am richer than you. 38 servants lined the steps in uniform, shivering in February cold just to bow as he entered, their presence more pageantry than practicality, because in the Gilded Age, even service was theater. Harrow, the butler, guided him through the endless tour, past coal furnaces and electric generators, kitchens staffed like regiments, silver vaults heavy with cutlery, wine cellars deep enough to flood a man's conscience, until the absurdity became almost comic. A palace used 8 weeks a year, standing empty the rest. Left alone, sipping tea from porcelain worth more than a miner's annual wage, he received a telegram. Trouble at Pittsburgh Mill, General strike threatened. Pinkerton agents on standby, awaiting orders. And this is the truth beneath the chandeliers. Every crystal prism in Breakwater Hall was purchased with labor broken, lives lost, families gutted by 12-hour shifts, by fires in tenements, by collapsed scaffolds and mine explosions. The telegram crumpled in his hand as the sun set over the Atlantic, waves hammering cliffs below, and the question he could no longer avoid pressed harder than velvet drapes. Was any of this worth the cost? Dinner that evening was served at a table for 24, though he dined alone, 7 courses brought by 6 people, the absurdity hollowing him. Afterward, wandering the echoing halls, he felt less like a master than a ghost haunting a monument to greed. And here, let me turn to you again, because perhaps you've envied wealth, perhaps you've dreamed of mansions and servants, of never worrying about bills. But ask yourself, would you want to live in a palace where every smile is paid for, every laugh rehearsed, every kindness purchased with blood you never see? He drifted into uneasy sleep, dreams filled with children in mines, women coughing in tenements, men crushed by rail cars, all while he stood in a silk dressing gown, clutching a gold watch. And when dawn came again, and Richardson's voice returned with another "Good morning, sir," he realized something chilling. This wasn't a nightmare he could wake from. This was reality for men of his rank, reality gilded and poisoned. So here's the hook to leave you with, the truth buried in velvet and marble. Having it all, in the Gilded Age, didn't mean freedom. It meant chains forged from gold, cages lined with silk, power weighted with guilt. And if you still think you'd trade places, remember this: sometimes the most dangerous prison is the one that glitters brightest.